The sun was bright that afternoon, and the whole town buzzed with excitement. The air was filled with laughter, the sound of music, and the smell of sweet flowers. It was the wedding day of Lola, the daughter of one of the richest families in the city. Everything looked beautiful: white tents, golden chairs, and guests dressed in fine clothes. Everyone was smiling, except for one tired woman walking along the road nearby. Her name was Aisha. She was a poor woman, carrying a baby in her womb and pain in her heart. Her dress was old and torn, her sandals almost broken, and her face pale from hunger. 4 days she had eaten nothing but dry bread. She had been walking from one street to another, hoping to find someone kind enough to help her. But everywhere she went, doors were closed and faces turned away. When she heard the sound of drums and singing, she followed the music. Maybe someone there will help me, she thought. She held her stomach carefully as she walked toward the big wedding hall. People stared at her as she came closer. Some laughed, others whispered, but she kept walking. She didn't care about their stares, she was desperate, and her baby's safety mattered more than her pride. At the gate, the security men tried to stop her. "Madam, where are you going?" one asked. "I just need a little food or water," she said softly. Her voice was weak, almost breaking. The men looked at each other. They didn't know what to do. She looked harmless, just a tired pregnant woman. So they let her walk inside. The hall was shining with lights and laughter. People were dancing, clapping, and eating from plates full of rice, meat, and cake. Aisha looked around in awe. She hadn't seen such beauty in years. She smiled faintly, even though her stomach rumbled. She whispered a prayer of thanks just for being able to rest her legs for a moment. But not everyone was happy to see her there. From across the hall, Lola, the bride, noticed Aisha standing by the corner. Her beautiful face turned angry. "Who let this woman in?" she asked loudly, her voice cutting through the music. Everyone turned to look. The laughter stopped. Aisha froze where she stood, suddenly feeling small and ashamed. I just wanted to sit for a moment," Aisha stammered, her voice shaking. Lola walked toward her, her white gown shining under the lights. "Sit for a moment?" she said harshly. "Do you know where you are? This is my wedding, not a place for beggars." A few guests tried to calm her down. One older woman said gently, "Lola, please don't make a scene. She's pregnant. Let her stay." But Lola snapped, "No. Look at her. She doesn't belong here. She will bring bad luck to my marriage." Tears filled Aisha's eyes. She tried to speak, but her voice failed. The bride's words cut deep, sharper than a knife. "Please," Aisha whispered, "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just wanted a little food. I've not eaten since yesterday." Lola's face hardened. "Then go and find food somewhere else," she shouted. Before anyone could stop her, Lola pushed Aisha roughly toward the door. The poor woman lost her balance and fell to the ground outside the hall. The crowd gasped, but no one moved to help her. The guards just stood there, confused and silent. Aisha lay on the ground, her hands around her belly, trembling with pain. The sand beneath her was hot, but her heart felt colder. She looked up at the grand hall, the place filled with laughter and celebration, and felt tears run down her cheeks. Inside, the music started again. Lola smiled and danced as if nothing had happened. The guests clapped, pretending to forget what they had seen. Only one small child, standing by the door, watched Aisha with sad eyes. He ran to her and offered a small bottle of water. "Here, Auntie," he said softly. Aisha took it with shaking hands. "Thank you, my child," she whispered. She sat by the road for a long time, staring at the sky. The world around her was still full of noise and happiness, but her heart was quiet. The wind blew gently, lifting the dust around her feet. She thought of her life, of how she had no family, no home, no one to call her own. And now, even strangers treated her like she was nothing. She felt a sharp pain in her belly and held it tight, afraid. The baby kicked softly, as if reminding her to be strong. She closed her eyes and breathed slowly. "Don't worry, my baby," she whispered. "Mama will keep you safe." After a while, she gathered her strength and stood up. Her legs were weak, but she refused to stay on the ground. She wiped her tears with the corner of her dress and looked once more at the shining wedding hall. She could hear Lola laughing inside, her voice full of pride and joy. Aisha's heart ached, but she did not curse or shout. Instead, she raised her hands to the sky and said in a quiet voice, "One day God will judge between us. He sees what people hide behind their fine clothes and sweet smiles." Then she turned away and started walking down the road. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. Her shadow stretched long behind her. Each step hurt, but she kept moving, her hope shining like a small flame that refused to die. She passed by people who ignored her, by cars that splashed dust on her clothes, by children who laughed as she limped along. But she didn't stop. Her heart whispered to her, "Keep walking, Aisha. Your story is not over." When she reached a small tree by the roadside, she sat beneath it and leaned her back against the trunk. The wind blew softly, carrying the scent of the flowers from the wedding. She smiled faintly and whispered again, "One day things will change." The stars began to appear slowly in the darkening sky. Somewhere far away music still played, but Aisha's world had grown quiet. Her eyes grew heavy, and she rested her hand on her stomach. Her baby kicked again, gently this time. "Sleep, little one," she whispered. "Tomorrow will be a new day." And as she drifted into a light sleep, a single tear rolled down her cheek, not just from pain, but from a quiet kind of strength that refused to die. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she believed, deep in her heart, that life still had something good waiting for her. That night, under the soft glow of the moon, a poor pregnant woman slept beside the road, carrying both her sorrow and her hope, while inside the big hall, the bride danced under the lights, unaware that the woman she had pushed away would one day become the one who would teach her the greatest lesson of her life. That moment, though cruel and painful, was the beginning of something that neither of them could yet see. A story of pride, forgiveness, and the power of destiny had just begun. Months passed and the world slowly changed for Aisha. The wound in her heart had not fully healed, but she had learned to live with it. The pain of that day, the wedding, the shouting, the humiliation, still haunted her sometimes in her dreams. Yet every morning when the sun rose, she woke up with quiet determination. She was no longer just a poor woman who had been kicked out, she was now a mother. Her baby boy had become her reason to smile again. When the time came, she gave birth in a small clinic run by kind nurses who helped her even though she could not pay much. She named her son Sadiq, meaning faithful. He was small but strong, with bright eyes that looked like tiny stars. When Aisha held him for the first time, tears of joy rolled down her cheeks. She whispered to him softly, "You are my gift, my little miracle. As long as you are with me, I will never give up." Life after his birth was not easy. Aisha lived in a small rented room made of wood and iron sheets. The roof leaked when it rained, and sometimes the wind blew the door open in the middle of the night. But she did not complain. Every day she carried a basket of fruits on her head, oranges, mangoes, and bananas, and walked to the roadside to sell them. She smiled at strangers, greeted customers politely, and always said thank you, even when they ignored her or bargained too harshly. Her baby stayed on a mat beside her as she worked. Whenever he cried, she would sing softly to him, her voice sweet and calm. "Sleep, my child," she would hum, "God is watching over us." People in the area began to notice her kindness. One woman said, "That fruit seller has a gentle heart. She never argues, never cheats, and always smiles." Another man often bought from her and said, "If the world had more people like you, it would be a better place." Though her clothes were old and her hands rough, Aisha's beauty came from her heart. She was like a quiet flower that bloomed even in dry soil. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, the grand house where Lola lived was no longer filled with laughter. The same woman who had once smiled proudly in her white gown now spent her nights in tears. Her husband, Kunal, who had once adored her, had changed. He came home late, sometimes not at all. When she asked questions, he simply said, "I'm busy," and walked away. At first, Lola tried to ignore it. She bought new clothes, decorated the house, and threw small parties to feel important again. But none of it filled the emptiness she felt inside. Each time she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw a woman whose smile no longer reached her eyes. One evening, while waiting for Kunal to return, Lola prepared his favorite meal. The food grew cold as she sat at the dining table, staring at the clock. Hours passed and finally she heard the sound of his car outside. She quickly stood up and tried to smile. "Welcome home," she said softly. Kunal looked tired and irritated. "I'm not hungry," he said, dropping his bag on the couch. "But you haven't eaten all day," Lola replied, trying to sound gentle. He sighed. "Lola, please stop acting like everything is fine. I need peace." Her smile faded. "Peace?" she repeated quietly. "You have everything, a big house, a wife who loves you, comfort. What peace are you talking about?" Kunal didn't answer. He just walked into his room and shut the door. Lola stood there, frozen, her eyes full of pain. That night, she sat by the window, staring into the darkness. For the first time she felt what loneliness truly meant. Days turned into weeks and the silence between them grew. The servants whispered about their fights, and neighbors began to notice that Kunal rarely came home. One day Lola overheard him talking on the phone. His voice was low, but she caught a few words. "I can't keep pretending," he said. "This marriage is empty." Her hands trembled. The world that once seemed so perfect was now breaking apart like glass. She remembered her wedding day, the music, the flowers, the laughter, and then for a brief moment, the image of the poor pregnant woman she had pushed out. It flashed in her mind, but she quickly shook it off. That woman has nothing to do with this, she told herself. Yet deep inside she felt a strange unease. In another corner of the same city, Aisha was having a different kind of night. Her small room was warm with love. Sadiq had just fallen asleep, his tiny hands curled around her fingers. She looked at him and smiled. "My son," she whispered, "the world once turned its back on us, but I will raise you to be a good man. One day you will make me proud." She didn't know that fate was slowly weaving their paths together again, hers and Lola's. The next morning, Aisha went to her usual spot by the roadside. Business was slow that day. The sun was hot, and most people hurried past without buying anything. But Aisha didn't give up. She stood patiently, waving at people with a gentle smile. A man driving by saw her and stopped his car. He bought a few mangoes and said, "You're always smiling. May God bless your work." "Thank you, sir," she said, bowing her head politely. Later that evening, when she was counting her small earnings, an old woman approached her. "You are the one who helped me cross the road last week," the woman said kindly. "Here, take this." She handed Aisha a small bag of rice. Aisha's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Ma. May God bless you." The woman smiled and said, "Good things come to those who do good." At that very moment, across town, Lola sat alone in her fancy living room, surrounded by gold furniture and silence. She looked around the house that once made her proud, and for the first time she realized it meant nothing without peace. The more she had, the less joy she felt. Her heart was heavy with regret, though she couldn't explain why. She whispered to herself, "Why do I feel empty?" As she laid her head on the couch, a thought crossed her mind, the poor pregnant woman from her wedding. The image came back clearer this time. She remembered how Aisha had fallen, how she had cried out in pain. Lola pressed her hands to her chest, her heart tightening. "What if I was wrong?" she said softly. But pride wouldn't let her say it aloud. Outside, the night grew quiet. In one small corner of the city, a poor woman prayed for a better tomorrow, and in another, a rich woman sat surrounded by luxury yet feeling completely lost. Two women, two hearts, living different lives. One rich but empty, the other poor but full of hope. Neither of them knew that destiny was still watching, waiting for the right moment to bring them face to face once again, not as victim and bully, but as two souls about to learn what true forgiveness and justice really meant. The evening breeze was gentle that day, carrying the scent of ripe mangoes and oranges across the street. The sky had turned golden, and the sound of cars and voices filled the air. Aisha stood behind her small fruit stand, arranging her fruits neatly as always. Her little boy, Sadiq, now 3 years old, sat beside her, playing with an empty bottle. Life had not become easy, but it was stable. Every coin she earned came from hard work and honest hands. She hummed softly while cleaning a few bananas, smiling as Sadiq giggled. Just then, a shiny black car slowed down near her stand. She looked up but quickly lowered her eyes. People with fancy cars didn't usually stop at small fruit stands. But to her surprise, the car parked right in front of her. The door opened and a tall man stepped out wearing a neat suit. His face looked calm but tired, like someone carrying too many thoughts. "Good evening," the man said kindly. "Good evening, sir," Aisha replied softly, her voice humble. The man looked at her stand, his eyes scanning the fruits carefully. "You have very fresh mangoes," he said, picking one up. "How much are they?" 500 naira for 3, sir," she answered with a smile. He nodded slowly, still looking at her. There was something familiar about her face, something he couldn't quite place. "Have we met before?" he asked, his voice curious but gentle. Aisha froze. For a moment, her heart skipped. She looked at him closely and then quickly turned her eyes away. I don't think so, sir," she said quietly, though deep inside she remembered his face clearly. The man smiled. "I see. Well, your face seems familiar. Maybe I'm mistaken." She hesitated, then said softly, "I once went to a wedding, but I was kicked out." The man's smile faded instantly. He looked at her again, this time with shock and disbelief. "A wedding?" he asked slowly. "When? Where?" She swallowed hard, her voice trembling slightly. It was many years ago, sir. A big wedding in the city. I went there to ask for help, but the bride, she didn't like me being there. Connell's eyes widened as realization hit him. He remembered that day clearly, the grand wedding, the laughter, the beautiful hall, and the chaos when a poor pregnant woman had entered. He had seen it happen but had been too shocked to speak. He remembered how his bride Lola had shouted at the woman and pushed her. That moment had stayed buried in his mind like a scar. You, he whispered, his voice full of guilt. You were that woman? Aisha looked down embarrassed. Yes, sir. But please don't worry. It's in the past. I have forgiven everything. Connell's heart ached. He could still see the pain in her eyes even though she tried to hide it. He looked at the child sitting beside her and asked softly, Is that your son? Yes, sir, she said, smiling faintly. His name is Sadiq. He is the reason I keep going. Connell bent down and smiled at the boy. He's a strong one, he said. Sadiq giggled shyly, hiding behind his mother. For a long moment there was silence. Cars passed by, people shouted prices, and the sun began to set. Connell stood there, deep in thought. He felt shame not because of what his wife had done, but because he had stayed silent that day. Finally he spoke again. How much for everything? Aisha looked up in surprise. Everything, sir? Yes, he said firmly. All the fruits on your stand. Her eyes widened. Sir, that's too much. You don't have to. I insist, he said gently, pulling out his wallet. I want all of it. Aisha hesitated, her hands shaking slightly. Thank you, sir. God bless you. Connell smiled sadly. No, Aisha. You bless yourself every day with your hard work. He paid her the full amount, far more than the price, and began helping her pack the fruits into baskets. People passing by stared in surprise. It was strange to see a man in a fine suit helping a fruit seller. But Connell didn't care. He wanted to do something good, something right. As they worked, he asked quietly, Do you still sell here every day? Yes, sir, she said. Morning till evening. He thought for a moment, then said, I own a company nearby. We buy fruits for our cafeteria. Would you like to supply them regularly? Aisha froze. Supply? Me? Yes, Connell replied with a kind smile. You're honest and hardworking. I can trust you. Tears filled her eyes as she covered her mouth. Sir, I don't know what to say. Say yes, he said softly. Let me give you a chance to grow your business. Aisha nodded slowly, still in disbelief. Yes, sir. I will. Thank you so much. Connell gave her his business card. Come tomorrow morning, he said. Ask for me. She held the card like a treasure, her hands trembling. God bless you, sir, she whispered. He smiled kindly. No need to thank me. You deserve better. When Connell drove away, Aisha stood there for a long time, staring at the road. The evening light glowed softly around her, and for the first time in years she felt something warm inside her. Hope. Real hope. That night she cooked rice and stew for Sadiq, humming happily. Her son laughed as she played with him. Mama, you're happy, he said, smiling with missing teeth. Yes, my child, she replied, hugging him close. God has remembered us. The next morning, Aisha woke up early. She washed her only good dress and pressed it carefully. She braided her hair neatly and wrapped her baby's lunch in a small cloth. Then she carried her basket and headed toward the company Connell had mentioned. Her heart beat fast with both excitement and fear. When she arrived, she saw a large building with shining glass doors. She hesitated at the entrance but then took a deep breath and stepped inside. The receptionist smiled at her. Good morning, Ma, she said. Good morning, Aisha replied softly. Please, I'm here to see Mr. Connell. The receptionist made a call, then said, He's expecting you. Please wait here. A few minutes later, Connell appeared, smiling warmly. Aisha, you came. Yes, sir, she said, bowing slightly. He introduced her to the manager and arranged everything for her fruit supply. You'll start next week, he said. We'll buy from you every 3 days. I'll also help you get better baskets and storage. Aisha couldn't hold back her tears. Sir, I don't know how to thank you. Connell smiled kindly. Just keep being who you are. That's thanks enough. When she left the building, her eyes were bright with tears but her heart was full of joy. She walked through the streets proudly, her steps light, her spirit strong. For the first time in years she felt respected, not as a poor woman but as someone valuable. Meanwhile, Connell watched her leave from his office window. Something stirred inside him, a mix of guilt and admiration. He thought about his wife, Lola, and how far she had drifted from kindness. He wondered what she would say if she knew he had helped the same woman she once humiliated. He sighed and whispered to himself, maybe this is how healing begins. As the sun set that day, Aisha sat outside her small home watching her son play. The air felt different, softer, sweeter. Her life was still simple, but now it had direction. She looked up at the sky and smiled. "Thank you, Lord," she said quietly. "Thank you for remembering me." And as the stars began to appear, Aisha knew in her heart that this was only the beginning of something greater, something she had never dared to dream of before. The morning of the big business event was bright and filled with excitement. Kunnal's company had been planning it for weeks. The event was meant to celebrate honesty, hard work, and community, values that Kunnal had recently learned to respect deeply. Banners were hung, chairs arranged neatly, and a red carpet led into the large conference hall. Everyone in town talked about it, especially because Kunnal had invited a special guest, a woman whose story had quietly inspired many. Her name was Aisha. That morning, Aisha stood before a small mirror in her modest home. She wore a clean, simple gown, light blue, soft and neatly ironed. Her little boy, Sadiq, watched her proudly. "Mama, you look like a queen," he said with a grin. She laughed softly. "No, my son, I am not a queen. I am just a woman who worked hard and God helped her." Still her heart beat fast. She had never attended such a big event. She wasn't sure how people would see her, a simple fruit seller among rich business owners. But Kunnal had personally visited her the day before, telling her, "Aisha, this event is not about wealth or status. It's about character. You belong there." Those words gave her courage. She reached the hall early, and when she entered, heads turned. Many recognized her as the woman who sold fruits by the roadside, but now she carried herself with quiet grace. Her eyes were calm, her smile warm. The staff led her to a seat at the front, beside Kunnal himself. She hesitated but sat down respectfully. Kunnal greeted her warmly. "You deserve to be here, Aisha. Today is your day too." "Thank you, sir," she said humbly. "You've done so much for me." "I only opened a door," he replied gently. "You walked through it." The hall began to fill with guests, business leaders, workers, and community members. Photographers clicked pictures, lights flashed, and people laughed over soft music. Everything looked perfect. But among the arriving guests was someone who had not been told who the special guest of honor was: Kunnal's wife, Lola. She arrived late, dressed in an elegant gold gown, her hair styled beautifully, and her face covered with pride. People admired her as she entered, whispering compliments. She smiled proudly, walking toward the front row where her husband sat. But when she saw Aisha sitting next to Kunnal, her steps slowed. Her smile faded. For a moment she stood frozen, as if her world had stopped. The same woman she had once humiliated at her wedding, the poor pregnant woman she had kicked out, was now sitting beside her husband at a public event. Lola blinked, thinking her eyes were deceiving her. But no, it was truly Aisha. She looked even more radiant now, her face glowing with quiet strength and dignity. Kunnal stood to greet Lola politely. "You made it," he said. Lola forced a smile. "Yes. I didn't want to miss your big event." Her voice trembled slightly as she sat down beside them. Aisha turned to her with a calm smile. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Kunnal," she said softly. Lola swallowed hard, unable to respond for a few seconds. "Good afternoon," she finally managed to say, her throat dry. As the program began, the master of ceremonies announced the purpose of the event: to honor people who had shown integrity and courage despite hardships. Kunnal took the microphone and began his speech. "Today," he said, "we celebrate those who prove that success is not about money but about character. We live in a world where people look down on others because of what they wear or what they own. But true greatness lies in kindness, humility, and honesty." The crowd clapped, nodding in agreement. Kunnal continued, his voice strong yet emotional. "There is someone here who has taught me this lesson more than anyone else. A woman who came from nothing, worked hard with her hands, and never lost her goodness, even when the world was unkind to her. Please welcome our guest of honor, Mrs. Aisha Musa." The hall erupted in applause. People stood and clapped as Aisha slowly rose from her seat, her heart pounding. She wasn't used to such attention, but she remembered Kunnal's words, "You belong here." She walked to the stage with steady steps. The lights shone on her, and for a moment, the memory of that painful wedding day flashed in her mind, the laughter, the insults, the shame. But she took a deep breath and smiled. She was no longer that helpless woman. Taking the microphone, she looked around the room. Her voice was calm and clear. Thank you, she began softly. I stand here today not because I am rich but because God raised me up when I was low. There was a time when I had nothing, not even hope. But someone showed me kindness and that kindness gave me strength to start again. People nodded and murmured in agreement. She paused, then turned her gaze toward the audience, her eyes finding Lola's. Their eyes met for a brief, tense moment. Aisha saw the shock and guilt in Lola's eyes, but she didn't speak with anger. Her tone remained gentle, filled with quiet wisdom. Life turns in ways we don't expect, she said slowly. One day you may be on top and the next you may find yourself needing help. That is why kindness is never a waste. It costs nothing, but pride can cost everything. The entire hall went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Every word struck deeply. Even those who didn't know her story felt the truth behind her words. A tear rolled down Lola's cheek. She looked down, her hands trembling. Memories flooded her mind, how she had pushed Aisha at her wedding, how she had laughed as others mocked her. Now the same woman stood tall before her, respected and loved by everyone. Aisha continued softly, I don't hold hatred in my heart. Life has already taught me enough. I only wish for people to remember that compassion is more powerful than pride. When she finished, the hall rose to its feet in thunderous applause. Some people wiped tears from their eyes. Even Kunnal's face showed pride and emotion. He looked at Aisha with deep respect, not pity but admiration. As she returned to her seat, Lola stood quietly, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't clap, she couldn't speak. She felt small, not because anyone had shamed her but because she had shamed herself. After the event ended, she slowly walked up to Aisha. Her voice trembled. I am sorry, she whispered, for everything I did to you that day. I was foolish and proud. Aisha smiled kindly, her eyes full of peace. The past is gone, she said gently. What matters is what we do next. Lola broke down and hugged her tightly. For the first time in years she cried not from anger but from deep regret. People around them watched silently, some crying, some smiling. Kunnal placed his hand on both their shoulders and said softly, This is what forgiveness looks like. And in that moment the bright lights, the elegant hall, and the sound of applause all faded into something greater, a picture of grace. That night, as the hall emptied and the stars filled the sky, Aisha walked home with her son, holding her small award plaque close to her heart. It wasn't made of gold or diamonds but it was worth more than both. It was proof that kindness wins in the end, quietly, humbly, and beautifully. The crowd had left the hall, the bright lights dimmed, and only a few people remained, cleaners moving chairs, photographers packing up, and quiet music still playing softly in the background. The evening had been unforgettable, but for two women, it had changed everything. Lola stood near the stage, staring at Aisha from a distance. She could still hear her words echoing in her mind, kindness costs nothing but pride can cost everything. Every word had pierced her heart like a mirror showing her what she had once been, proud, selfish and cruel. Her golden gown no longer felt beautiful. Her jewelry no longer shone. The applause she had once loved meant nothing now. What mattered was the heavy weight in her chest, guilt. Aisha, on the other hand, was quietly packing her things. She had spoken from her heart and expected nothing more. But she could feel someone watching her. When she turned, her eyes met Lola's, and in that moment both women froze. Lola's lips trembled. She took slow steps toward her. Every step felt heavier than the last. The sound of her heels echoed across the empty hall. When she finally stood before Aisha, tears were already streaming down her face. Without saying a word, she fell to her knees. Everyone who remained in the hall, the cleaners, the guards, a few reporters, stopped and stared in silence. Lola bowed her head and said in a shaky voice, Please forgive me. Aisha's eyes softened. She had never imagined this day would come. The same woman who once pushed her, laughed at her pain, and threw her out of a wedding hall was now kneeling before her. Aisha quickly bent down and helped her stand. No, please, she said gently, don't kneel before me. But Lola shook her head, her face red with shame. I don't deserve your kindness. I hurt you when you were already broken. I thought I was better than you, but I see now how blind I was. Aisha smiled kindly and said, I forgave you the day it happened. Lola's eyes widened. You forgave me? Yes, Aisha nodded softly. I forgave you not because you asked but because I needed peace. Hate makes the heart heavy. I couldn't carry both pain and hope together. Lola broke down completely, covering her face with her hands. You are a far better woman than I ever was, she said through tears. Aisha placed a hand on her shoulder. We are both women who have learned, she said gently. And learning is how we grow. Kunal, who had been watching from afar, walked toward them quietly. He had never seen his wife like this, humble, broken, human. He said softly, Lola, this is your chance to start again. We all make mistakes, but not everyone gets a chance to make things right. Lola looked at him, then turned back to Aisha. If you will allow me, she said, I want to help you. I want to make things right. Aisha hesitated for a moment, then smiled. Helping others is always welcome, she said warmly. And that was how their unlikely friendship began. A few weeks later, Aisha's story spread through the city. Newspapers printed her photo with headlines like, Fruit Seller Turns Inspiration, and Forgiveness That Changed Lives. People admired her courage and donations began to pour in. With the help of Kunal's business and a few kind sponsors, Aisha started a foundation, the Grace Home for Women. It was a small shelter at first with just a few rooms and a kitchen, but it welcomed poor women and pregnant mothers who had nowhere to go. Lola visited one morning holding a box of baby clothes. She was dressed simply now. No diamonds, no expensive perfume, just a long white dress and a headscarf. She walked in shyly. Aisha looked up from the kitchen and smiled. You came, she said warmly. I promised, Lola replied. I want to help however I can. From that day she became one of the most active volunteers in the foundation. She helped cook meals, bought supplies, and even sat with women to listen to their stories. At first, some people whispered behind her back. Is that not the same bride who once threw Aisha out? They asked. But Aisha always defended her. She has changed, she would say calmly. And everyone deserves a second chance. Slowly, people saw Lola's sincerity. She no longer acted proud. When visitors came to donate, she served them water herself. When poor mothers arrived crying, she hugged them with love. The same hands that once pushed Aisha now helped lift others. One afternoon, as they sat together sorting baby clothes, Aisha looked at Lola and said, Do you know why I think God brought us back together? Lola shook her head. Aisha smiled. Because he wanted to show that forgiveness can heal more than revenge ever could. Lola nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. You're right, she said. I thought power came from wealth. But true power comes from a gentle heart. Months passed and the foundation grew. Local leaders visited. Journalists came to cover their work. One of them asked Lola during an interview, You used to be known for your pride. How did this change happen? She smiled softly and said, I met a woman who taught me that kindness is the highest form of strength. The interviewer turned to Aisha, who was playing with some of the children nearby. And what do you think of her now? He asked. Aisha looked up and smiled. She is my sister, she said simply. That statement melted hearts all over the country. The video went viral and people began sending more support to their foundation. With the funds they built a bigger center, with proper beds, doctors and classrooms for children. They named it House of Mercy. At the opening ceremony, both women stood side by side under the bright sun. A large crowd gathered, clapping and cheering. Kunal stood proudly beside them. Aisha took the microphone and said, We began as strangers, even enemies. But life has a way of turning pain into purpose. We cannot change the past, but we can choose what we do with our future. Then she turned to Lola and said, And I am proud to share this future with my friend. The crowd applauded loudly. Lola wiped her tears, unable to speak. For the first time she felt peace inside, the kind that money could never buy. Later that evening, as the sky turned orange, Aisha and Lola sat outside watching the children play. The laughter of little ones filled the air. Do you remember the day we met? Aisha asked softly. Lola smiled sadly. I try not to, but I'll never forget. That day I was lost in pride. And now? Aisha asked. Now, Lola said, I am found in grace. They both laughed quietly. As night fell, a gentle breeze blew through the garden. The lamps around the compound glowed warmly, casting soft light on the two women, once enemies, now sisters in kindness. Their story soon became a lesson told in schools, churches, and homes, a reminder that humility and kindness are greater than wealth or beauty. Aisha continued to lead the foundation with a calm spirit, while Lola worked beside her faithfully. Together they built shelters, gave food to the hungry, and helped women find jobs. They had both changed, one through pain, the other through repentance, and together they turned their wounds into blessings for others. And so, the poor woman who was once kicked out of a wedding and the bride who once looked down on her became living proof that forgiveness can turn enemies into family, and grace can rebuild even the hardest heart. The end. Broken Heart Cherry Blossom.